guardrails, boundaries. And that's something that before we even had these discussions, when we were thinking about the whole self philosophy, listen to our first episode to learn more about the whole self philosophy. If you skipped
That's
it,
right.
It's a short one. It's worth a listen. But we think about the path on the Path podcast is that thing in your life you're working towards, whether it may be, it's family or whatever your purpose may be. You're living a very intentional life, but how do you stay on the path? And we kind of view the path, the left side of the path, the right side of the path as those boundaries. And how are you adjusting, whether it's your physical, mental, or spiritual health, or whether it's your personal accountability or actually holding yourself accountable to what you're supposed to do, or having that strong community like us. There's some times where, I need to send an email or you need to wake up, and we're getting each other's backs and pushing each other.
Welcome to the On the Path podcast, a conversation on navigating life. Join Chris Coker and Colin Creech as they have honest conversations with fellow travelers on the path. In each episode, they explore the physical, mental, and spiritual health aspects of the whole self, striving for personal accountability and a strong community. Gain insights, learn from our mistakes, and hear from guests who have mastered these areas. Step on the path, embracing every challenge and success along the way. See you on the path.
Chris,
My man.
this is our Debrief podcast, and last week we had Ryan McCool on the Path podcast. And honestly, we've known him for years, but he just came out with this book. It's not about you. I have to say, it's not about you either, Chris, but it's not about me. But no, it was such a good book. And of course, we'd have him on either way, but we genuinely appreciated that book. It doesn't just cover one topic. It covers the entire aspect of leadership. What is it? What looks good? What looks bad? Just in how you can input it into your own life. But what was some of the big takeaways you got from that conversation last week?
Oh, absolutely. So I'll pull on the one you're starting to talk on now, which is so in the book, he's got a ton of stories, and each story is about somebody else. Now, of course, he's involved in it, and it's this concept of just a collection of experiences. And he said in the episode last week, he talked a lot about perspective in the beginning and how that kind of shaped who he became as he continued to get older, go into the Marines, into the corporate sector, those sorts of things. And that's what jumps out. There's, kind of cover to cover, just story after story about these different experiences that he went through, and being able to take the good ones and the bad ones and use those as tools to help him grow and be better.
Yeah, and I think what spoke to us, but I think it's also good if you're a veteran, if you're not a veteran, a military veteran, or you've got corporate experience or a combination of both, is he talks about both sorts of situations and what good looks like in both situations, what bad looks like in both situations. And something that kind of stuck out to both of us because we've had experiences is, he talked a lot about assessments.
Yes.
And I think, talking about the leadership development experience,
Yep.
the assessment is something that sometimes you'll take. There's multiple different kinds of assessments, and they can be, a personality assessment. They can help you understand yourself better. They can be a tool to maybe see how far could you potentially go. And we know he's a giant fan. I think, what he spoke to is it's, the experience part is so important. I think to me, the assessments are definitely a tool. What has your experience been with assessments, especially in corporate America? Yeah,
no, I agree. I like the way that you frame it. It's a tool. And I think some of what Ryan was getting at is don't over-index in the tools. Leverage them for what they are. They are just a tool, because at the end of the day, when you are in a leadership position, it is about the team. It's not about the leader. That's kind of the whole premise in what he's talking about. It's all about how can you become the best version of yourself, and then do that selflessly in service of other people. And so for me, that's where I think those tools become helpful, these assessments, where it gives you an opportunity to reflect, right? Like self-reflection is something I was never amazing at. I've gotten a lot better at it over time. This is a space where you have helped me grow quite a bit, Colin.
You've helped me too.
But these are the tools that I think can help somebody do that, especially when, there are some out there where they take a lot of feedback from outside sources. Where they can say, hey, this might be how others perceive you as you operate in the world. And so in that way, I see assessments as a good thing. or it gives people kind of a foothold in the self-discovery process. But to Ryan's point, that should be a tool. It's not the predicate for the entire concept of leadership development. The true development happens when you learn how to leverage those tools, know the kind of leader you are, and then try to be better in service of the team that you're leading.
So a driver's test doesn't mean you're then a good driver if you pass?
That's a great analogy, actually. Yes, exactly. I know a lot of licensed drivers who I would not sit in a car with.
I think what kind of stuck out to me is we think about the whole self philosophy, especially physical, mental, spiritual. But in the military and in sports and in other places of life, you do something physical. In the military, we do physical fitness test.
Yep.
Outside of that, in mixed martial arts, you do test or you do time to get the next belt. And what I think that helps be a good gauge for where you at physically. And so when I think about these assessments in the corporate sphere that we've taken, they've been really good data points for me there too. So I know how physically fit I am according to the military standards because of that test. And because of the assessments, they've been very helpful for me. For an example, I did one that was really focused on kind of self-awareness and personal development.
Yeah.
And one of the things was, what happens when you get stressed? Maybe what are the things that come out? And what I saw in it, and it was kind of a shocker, but also like, oh, that completely makes sense, was whenever I potentially get stressed, I'm dutiful and diligent, like maxed out. And I was like, yeah, from the military, I can definitely see that. When I get stressed, I button down the hatches and I'm gonna get whatever it is done.
Yep.
It was also good for me to know, okay, when I'm stressed or there's a lot of pressure at work, that's also an opportunity for me to still got to get it done, but take a step back and make sure I'm not missing the strategic aspects of it. Sometimes you got to get it done, but maybe you need to adjust things along the way and just that self-awareness part. So again, a data point that doesn't mean it's completely accurate all the time, or that it's going to be the reality of what we see out in the wild, I would say, of corporate America, but definitely things that are good tools for the toolbox. But if you take some sort of leadership assessment and it's like 100%, I don't know how it'd be possible, but I also don't know if that's going to be like the accurate statement when you're actually applying it in a real world situation, whether it's the military, corporate or whatever it may be in a family.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things, we talk, for those of you that have listened to a couple episodes, we talk a lot about how these things are all interconnected. And one of the things that jumped out, like when Ryan was talking about some of his stories, it kind of clicked for me. I was like, wait a second, like it's repetition there too. The same way I get up and go to the gym to try to get stronger, or, if it's, journaling every day, right? These are repetitions, and in every way, repetitions make you better and better and better over time. So even this concept of just, using these tools to understand who you are as a leader, then go back to them from time to time, or at least reflect on the output. Like what you were just saying, this concept of like dutiful diligence, these sorts of words. Think about next time you're stressed out. Now it crosses your mind where you're like, okay, wait a second. I know myself well enough to know this is what happens when I get stressed out. And suddenly the response that you'll have to those things gets better and better. And so I think that's another one too, is kind of the framework in which Ryan lives his life. There's repetition there, and you can see, because we've had the luxury of knowing him for a long time.
And reading his book.
You see that growth, which to me I think is big, which kind of brings us into, I'd say kind of the third big takeaway in the conversation. He talked about guardrails. And using that, we'd asked him, we said, what keeps you on the path? And he said, well, it's the guardrails that he kind of puts in his life. And that was when it clicked for me, like, okay, this guy has a lot of frameworks that keep him moving in the direction that he wants. And I agree with that. I think that kind of structure is a good thing, having these repetitions, knowing yourself well enough to know kind of what your triggers are, what might derail you, what keeps you on the path, and kind of unpacking that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. We were talking before this episode where that also came out in our episode with Mike Sorelli, the guardrails, boundaries. And that's something that before we even had these discussions, when we were thinking about the whole self-philosophy, in listening to our first episode to learn more about the whole self-philosophy, if you skipped
that's
it,
right.
It's a short one. It's worth a listen. But we think about the path on the Path podcast is that that thing in your life you're working towards, whether it may be, it's family or whatever your purpose may be. You're living a very intentional life, but how do you stay on the path? And we kind of view the path, the left side of the path, the right side of the path as those boundaries. And how are you adjusting, whether it's your physical, mental, or spiritual health, or whether it's your personal accountability or actually holding yourself accountable to what you're supposed to do, or having that strong community like us. There's some times where, I need to send an email or you need to wake up, and we're getting each other's backs and pushing each other. But kind of back to the point that those boundaries, or that healthy awareness of where you are, like, did I stray too far? Did I play Xbox for 4 hours and I got a lot of virtual passengers where they needed to go in a flight simulator, but was that really a good use of my time? Or am I adding a new vice that I probably shouldn't be adding in my life right now with all my other responsibilities?
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things I'll credit Ryan with when he mentioned that flight simulator, when he said that, I was like, oh, he played it. And then he was like, I was on that for 4 hours. I was like, damn.
But it sounded kind of nice too. I was like, I want to play that.
I'd love to do that. But I really appreciate that's just kind of in his nature. And I see that as a massive strength to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, this is currently a derailer for me. I can enjoy it. I can do this as, an activity. He can get on the flight simulator and play it and have a good time. But he had the self-awareness to say, I was on it for way too long, and what am I giving up by choosing to do that? And that's where those guardrails become so important. And obviously he has kind of like the mental fortitude to one, look himself in the mirror and say, okay, 4 hours is maybe a little long. I shouldn't do that a bunch of time, too many times. But then he also gives himself the grace to say, not a big deal. I'm going to do better next time. And I think that's just the right answer. And the community piece is huge. That's why we talk to guests. That's why we want listeners to tune into the show and have a good time, because we want to kind of build these like-minded and like-hearted people that see things this way and that want to push others.
And it does take daily work, but what I know we talked about on this Debrief podcast is just skims the surface of not even our podcast, but his book. Yep. It's not about you. But what I really like to maybe hear a little bit from you briefly is, are there anything you're taking away from this book or that time with Ryan that maybe you're bringing into your life and your whole self-philosophy and in your life on the path with all your responsibilities?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There are a couple, I even told him, I said, man, there are a couple of nuggets for me that I'm just going to leave in my hip pocket. One, I will not get back on my soapbox, but the cool down circle, I just love it. I love this idea of do hard things and then take a second to slow down and catch your breath. I think is great. Whether it's because things are going well or things aren't going well, take a pause, take a quick moment to just assess what's going on and how you should respond to it. So for me, that was a huge one. And then the other one, I take a lot of pride in being an eternal optimist. And so when he told that story about the builders that were building the castle, I was like, there's the one guy who was just chiseling stone, and then there was this other guy who doing the same activity, but he was building a castle. And that to me was a really, really powerful story. So what about you?
I think really the servant leadership part, I think it's such a hot topic. It's such a big word, but I think it is a constant reminder. The situations in his book were cringeworthy at times of what is not good look like. That's a great way to say it. What is bad? Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. And I think that was a good reminder. And I think with that part is, leading by example, because everybody's also always watching. So if you're talking about, I'm a servant leader, but everybody's observing and they hear you say it all the time, it makes you look worse if you're not actually living by example by what you're practicing, by practicing what you preach.
Yeah.
So I think that one was a huge one. And I think it was in the book, but we didn't get to it. The Army doctrine quote. It was like
ADP 6-22.
Well, yes, yeah. I haven't read all your Army doctrine, but it was talking about like humility is the lack of arrogance. That's not verbatim. It was really well written, but I think humility is going to come one way or the other. You're either going to crash and burn at some point in your life. You're going to have your mistakes. And if you're bragging and talking all up, like how good the tech is on this podcast right now, and it's not good, then you're like, oh no, it's going to hurt more. But by constantly just checking yourself and making sure you're you're doing what you're supposed to do, but also, doing it versus saying what you're doing, not, practicing humility, but living humble was really important. Like a good reminder for me, because I don't think I necessarily suffer from ego, but that's also the first step when you're like, I don't have an ego problem, to having your ego sneak up on you too.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So for everybody listening, if you haven't had a chance, I mean, we could keep going on and on. Obviously, with these debriefs, we want to be brief. But really big takeaways on having these guardrails, these frameworks in your life to help you make sure you're staying on the path. Think about assessments. Maybe there are actual tangible assessments that happen in your workplace or in your life where you could use those, but it's really about the self-reflection behind that. And then the third one was experiences, and understanding that at the end of the day, we are nothing more than a collection of the experiences that we have, and to pull on those and use them to make us better and better over time. So give it a listen. Make sure you check it out. And as always, we'll see you on the path.
See you on the path.